Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're going to dive beneath the surface of what can honestly only be described as a literal seismic event in the legal world. We are looking at the historic 2026 US News Law School rankings. But more importantly, we're going to reveal the data-driven reality of modern legal hiring. Because look, if you think a law degree's value is still purely about the fancy name on the diploma, well, you might want to prepare to have your assumptions completely challenged. Let's kick things off with a number that really sets the stage here. 36. For an incredible 36 consecutive years, Yale Law School held the undisputed #1 spot in those rankings. I mean, that is more than 3 decades of absolute, unchallenged dominance. We're talking about entire generations of lawyers who have gone their whole careers with Yale just sitting comfortably on the throne. So when this year's rankings dropped, it wasn't just a minor tweak. It was a massive disruption to the natural order of the legal universe. And the legal community was genuinely shocked by this. Above the Law immediately ran with the headline, "End of an Era." Because for the longest time, there's been this deeply held belief that the hierarchy of elite legal education is just this untouchable fortress. But this historic dethroning challenges all of that. It really forces us to ask, if the king can be toppled, what else is shifting right under our feet?
Section 1. The new Top 10. Meet the 2026 elite.
Let's look at the schools that actually make up this brand new top tier. Because of a bunch of notable ties, the prestigious top 10 is actually composed of 11 elite institutions right now. Stanford officially claims the lone #1 crown. Yale has actually dropped into a tie for #2 with the University of Chicago. We're also seeing Penn, Carey, and UVA aggressively claiming the #4 spot, putting them ahead of Harvard at 6. And then Duke, NYU, Columbia, Northwestern, and Michigan round out the rest of this new elite group. Moving right along to Section 2, the end of the T14, winners and losers of 2026. Because the shockwaves definitely didn't stop at the top 10. Beyond that elite group, the traditional T14, which, let's be real, has long been considered the impenetrable VIP section of law schools, saw its own massive earthquake. The borders have practically been redrawn. We're seeing a huge shift underway. Vanderbilt, Cornell, and WashU have successfully fought their way into the elite ranks. But then you have traditional heavyweights like Berkeley, Texas, and Georgetown unexpectedly dropping out of the top 14 altogether. I mean, Berkeley falling to 16 and Georgetown to 18 is a huge deal. It tells us pretty clearly that resting on your historical reputation is no longer enough to guarantee a spot in the most exclusive club in legal education. Naturally, the reactions to all this have been incredibly intense. The LSAT Unplugged podcast, for instance, framed this whole shakeup as a cultural rejection of outdated prestige metrics. They literally call the rankings peak boomer and a relic of a world where prestige was gated. Now, while we're not taking a stance on whether rankings are a boomer relic or not, this quote really highlights a growing sentiment among applicants and professionals. People are genuinely starting to question whether a magazine's list should dictate the entire trajectory of their legal career. Section 3. Prestige versus employment outcomes. The methodology shift. To really understand why these legendary schools shifted so dramatically, we kind of have to look beneath the headlines. US News didn't just tweak their math a little bit. They completely changed the rules of the game. The rankings have basically transformed from a prestige contest into a heavily employment-driven formula. Look at this. A staggering 58% of a school's score now relies strictly on job placement and bar passage rates. In the past, things like library staffing or peer opinion surveys held way more weight. Now, the system directly rewards schools that actually get their graduates to pass the bar and get hired. It's a real game changer. And you can see how this builds into the new rankings right away. Schools that consistently secure those high-paying big law jobs and prestigious federal clerkships for their grads were heavily rewarded by this new 58% methodology. The University of Chicago, Penn, Carey, and UVA rocketed up the list for one simple reason. They are absolute machines when it comes to placing students into highly coveted legal roles. They aren't just relying on their famous names anymore, they are delivering concrete, measurable outcomes. Which brings us to Section 4, the real ROI of hiring, what law firms actually value. This intense focus on job placement naturally leads us to ask, well, what do the employers actually care about? Let's step away from the US News formula for a second and look at real-world data from the 2026 SurePoint Technologies report on big law. The hiring landscape is honestly unrecognizable from what it was just a few years ago. Law firms are scouting so aggressively and so early. A massive 85% of offers for summer programs were made before July. Firms are even handing out multi-year jumbo offers to first-year law students before they barely even have grades.
And traditional on-campus interviews? Yeah, 30% of law firm offices have abandoned OCI entirely. It's a mad dash for talent, upending traditional timelines to lock down the absolute best candidates.
But here's where the story takes a super fascinating turn. As firms get more and more aggressive, they're actually relying less on traditional prestige. A decade ago, nearly half, 47% of entry-level hires in the AmLaw 200 came from elite T14 schools. But by 2025, that share dropped significantly to just 33%. Firms are casting a much, much wider net. But why? If they want the best of the best, why aren't they just exclusively hunting inside the T14?
Well, it all comes down to retention, meaning who is actually sticking around at the firm. This is the absolute critical data point. Entry-level associates from non-T14 schools actually have the highest 3-year retention rate at 54%. Compare that to T14 graduates, who sit at the lowest retention rate at just 49%. For a law firm, an associate who bounces before 3 years is basically a lost investment. The raw data proves that non-T14 graduates are simply a better, safer long-term bet. To put that into perspective, when you look at the raw return on investment for these firms, the results are pretty staggering. Brooklyn Law School, which is ranked 105th by US News, boasts a 61% retention rate. Now look at the bottom of that list. The number 1 and number 2 schools in the country, Stanford and Yale, are sitting at 41% and 35% retention respectively. Barely a third of Yale grads stay at their big law firm for 3 years. If you're a hiring partner looking for associates who are going to stick around, finish their training, and actually become profitable, statistically, a grad from Brooklyn Law is a much safer bet than one from Yale.
And, beyond just retention and rankings, we've talked about geography because it is a massive driver of opportunity. Proximity to major legal markets often totally trumps a magazine-assigned prestige rank. Just the New York area alone commands 28% of all AmLaw 200 placements. Schools that are situated in or near major legal hubs like New York, DC, or Chicago provide these incredible localized networking and hiring advantages that a general national ranking just cannot capture. The reality is, firms are waking up. The SurePoint report points out that they're becoming much more critical about defining what makes a successful attorney, rather than just chasing a competitive candidate with a shiny resume. They want resilience, they want grit, and they want the willingness to do the grueling work required to succeed long-term, regardless of whether that associate's diploma comes from the T14 or the T100. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to really ponder. As AI begins to totally reshape mid-level legal work, like document review, and as hard retention data continues to disrupt traditional big law hiring, you really have to look ahead. Ask yourself, are you preparing for the profession exactly as it exists today, or as it will exist in 2030? Because the data is crystal clear right now. True success in the legal field is no longer defined by a magazine's list. It's defined by your actual skills, your location, and your long-term value. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and hey, keep asking the right questions.